The South China Sea has become one of the most dangerous flashpoints on Earth, a geopolitical powder keg where China's aggressive expansion, US alliances, and barely defined red lines are converging. This critical trade corridor, responsible for trillions in annual commerce, is on the brink. A single miscalculated maneuver, an accidental radar lock, a clash over a disputed reef, could spiral into a full-blown war between nuclear-armed superpowers. But what would that look like? Let's walk through a potential scenario hour by hour, beginning with a seemingly routine supply run gone wrong. At 0630 local time on day 1, the Philippine patrol vessel BRP Teresa Magbanua departs from Palawan, carrying monthly provisions and construction materials to the BRP Sierra Madre, a grounded World War II-era ship that now serves as a forward outpost in the Spratly Islands. This mission, permitted under a temporary agreement between Manila and Beijing, is strictly logistical. On board are 67 naval personnel, tasked only with resupplying the semi-operational Sierra Madre. However, 3 Chinese Coast Guard vessels, CCG 5205, 5901, and 21555, begin shadowing the Philippine ship from international waters. 2 hours into the voyage, and just 18 nautical miles from the Sierra Madre, CCG 5901 suddenly performs a dangerous blocking maneuver, coming within 15 meters of the Magbanua and threatening to use water cannons, a tactic China has used previously under the guise of preventing collisions. The Philippine vessel holds course. Both ships are forced to react rapidly to avoid a crash, but in the heavy seas, that proves impossible. Just before 0900 hours, CCG 5901 strikes the Magbanua on her port side. The impact breaches the hull and kills 4 Filipino sailors instantly. The Sierra Madre sends emergency aid, and Philippine Naval Headquarters in Manila receives a distress call. While Chinese vessels initially appear to offer help, they quickly withdraw once Philippine reinforcements are announced. It's the first deadly clash in the South China Sea since 1988. By 10:30, President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. convenes the National Security Council. Given his prior assertion that any Filipino deaths in such incidents would be treated as tantamount to war, military retaliation becomes a serious consideration. At noon, U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth confirms that the Mutual Defense Treaty between the U.S. and the Philippines applies to this confrontation. The USS Carl Vinson Carrier Strike Group, already operating just over 400 miles away, begins moving toward Philippine waters. By 1400, Japan's Maritime Self-Defense Force places destroyer JS Sazanami on high alert. Prime Minister Ishiba expresses grave concern and readiness to support the Philippines. Australia's HMAS Warramunga, on patrol nearby, requests authorization to assist in search and rescue. It's becoming clear regional allies are now involved. At 1630, just 7 hours after the initial incident, the Chinese Navy dispatches 2 destroyers, Type 055 and Type 052D, from Hainan. Beijing blames the collision on unlawful Philippine behavior, while President Xi Jinping convenes China's Central Military Commission in an emergency session. At 1800 hours, U.S. destroyers USS Halsey and USS John Finn depart from Subic Bay, armed with Tomahawk missiles and SM-6 interceptors. Meanwhile, U.S. F-35B fighters patrol the airspace 100 miles from the crash site. By 2000, the UN Security Council calls an emergency meeting. Shipping rates spike, commodity prices rise, and it's only day 1. Day 2 begins at 0200 hours as NATO satellite imagery reveals Chinese J-11 fighters and H-6K bombers deploying to artificial islands in the Spratlys. Fiery Cross Reef now hosts anti-ship missiles. Mischief Reef activates its radar systems and deploys HQ-9 surface-to-air missiles. At 0400, the Carl Vinson Strike Group positions itself 200 miles east of the islands. F-18F Super Hornets begin continuous combat air patrols. At 0600, Tokyo invokes its right to collective self-defense. The JS Maya destroyer, equipped with Aegis missile defense, departs for the Philippine Sea. F-35A jets from Misawa begin extended patrols toward the Taiwan Strait. Around 0800, Vietnam sends 2 Gepard-class frigates and a Kilo-class submarine from Cam Ranh Bay, activating Soviet-era S-300s and placing fighter aircraft on alert. The conflict now threatens to engulf the western South China Sea. At 1000, a Chinese destroyer begins electronic surveillance of the U.S. carrier group, disrupting communications between F-18s and the Carl Vinson. This showcases China's advanced EW capabilities, developed after the 2023 Growler incident. In response, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese activates the ANZUS Treaty. The HMAS Collins submarine deploys, and Australia places its entire fleet on high alert. By 1500, Chinese Coast Guard vessel CCG 21555 aggressively approaches Philippine boats aiding Sierra Madre survivors. The USS John Finn intervenes, positioning itself between the two navies. A 4-hour standoff follows. Chinese J-11 fighters patrol within 50 miles of US carrier aircraft. Global markets tank. The Shanghai Composite and Nikkei plunge. Brent oil prices surge. Day 3 brings actual military engagement. US submarine USS Minnesota receives targeting data on Chinese formations. A Chinese Type 093 submarine shadows the US fleet. Both subs engage in a silent cat-and-mouse game. At 0300, Chinese DF-21D carrier killer missiles are prepped in Hainan. The Carl Vinson retreats 800 miles to evade targeting, but China doesn't fire first. At 0500, North Korea launches 2 ballistic missiles into the Sea of Japan. South Korea raises its alert level, suspecting coordination with China. Meanwhile, China announces military drills near Taiwan, a likely ruse to reposition naval assets. Taiwan activates its missile defense and scrambles F-16V fighters. At 0930, Britain commits the HMS Prince of Wales to the Indo-Pacific. France sends the Charles de Gaulle carrier group. NATO is fully alerted. At 1100, a Chinese militia vessel rams Philippine boats. Philippine FA-50s respond, and Chinese J-11s fire warning shots. Meanwhile, India, concerned about the Malacca Strait, positions forces near Singapore. At 1400, China launches cyberattacks that cripple the Philippines' internet infrastructure. 2 hours later, PLA bombers and DF-27 missiles are detected by US satellites. These weapons, capable of Mach 10 speeds, are nearly impossible to intercept. Chinese Su-35s lock onto a Japanese destroyer, prompting Japan to use countermeasures. US F-35s deploy, forcing Chinese fighters to retreat. By 1900, the US raises its DEFCON level to 2. Chinese nuclear forces are on the move. Ballistic missile submarines deploy. US submarines shadow Chinese movements. At 2315, a Chinese destroyer fires warning shots at a Vietnamese frigate. Vietnam responds with radar targeting and coastal missiles. The two sides exchange fire, intentionally missing to avoid escalation. By the end of day 3, 4 are dead, 24 injured, and trillions wiped from markets. Port closures in Singapore, Hong Kong, and Shanghai paralyze supply chains. At 200 hours on day 4, President Xi orders the invasion of Taiwan. China launches the largest amphibious assault since D-Day. Over 100 naval vessels and 400 aircraft swarm the island. Taiwan strikes back with Swingfang 3 missiles and F-16V fighters, but J-20 stealth jets establish temporary air superiority. Taiwan enacts porcupine defenses, mines, port closures, and coastal barriers. The US faces an impossible decision: defend Taiwan or the Philippines. By 0400, the US declares war on China. Tokyo follows suit. Chinese missiles target US bases in Japan, striking Kadena Air Base. Japanese ports are blockaded. DEFCON 1 is triggered. Russian nuclear forces also escalate. The world teeters on the edge of global nuclear war. By day 5, European markets suspend trading. Russia joins China, deploying its Pacific Fleet and bombers to threaten Japan and Alaska. Australia mobilizes its full military. North Korea escalates missile launches. Global shipping is paralyzed. Taiwan's semiconductor production halts. Apple, Samsung, Tesla suspend operations. The G7 convenes an emergency summit. China pressures smaller South China Sea nations and Belt and Road allies. Djibouti closes US ports. Pakistan considers hosting Chinese nuclear subs. Africa faces coercion. Mines in Central Africa are bombed, killing hundreds. On day 6, the US, UK, and Australia launch cruise missile strikes on Chinese islands. China suffers military losses, but mobile missile platforms survive. HMS Astute sinks a Chinese destroyer. In the Indian Ocean, China threatens the Middle East. India responds with BrahMos missiles. The war now spans 6,000 miles. China targets GPS satellites. The US retaliates by jamming Baidu. Both countries ramp up cyber warfare. The US Space Force monitors Chinese airspace for orbital weapons. By week 2, hypersonic DF-27 missiles strike Guam, killing dozens. The US hits Chinese missile factories with limited success. Power grids across Asia go dark. China cuts global internet cables. All nuclear powers are on high alert. By the end of week 2, the world is fully engulfed in military and economic crisis. China blocks the Suez Canal. NATO invokes Article 5 after attacks on Cyprus. Germany supports the alliance. Russia militarizes its border. Iran attacks Saudi oil. Oil hits record highs. Africa and South America suffer chaos. By week 3, Taiwan is fully blockaded. Thousands are dead. Precision warfare gives way to grinding attrition, rivaling Ukraine's bloodiest years. Week 4 presents 2 outcomes. Allied air dominance forces Chinese retreat or World War III erupts. In desperation, Putin fires nuclear missiles at the US, The US, UK, and France respond. Israel, Pakistan, and Iran follow. 5 billion could die in a nuclear winter lasting a decade. Only Africa and South America might survive, but regress into extreme poverty. There is a chance the world pulls back. If Russia stands down and China, encircled and alone, is forced into peace talks, a ceasefire could be brokered. But every step into this hypothetical war makes predicting its end less possible. The lack of transparency about military capabilities makes long-term forecasts unreliable. Remember, Russia thought its war in Ukraine would last 3 weeks. It's now been over 3 years. The South China Sea could follow the same path, only this time the consequences would be global and potentially apocalyptic. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more deep dive analyses and future scenarios.